Chapter 14 Wood. A row of tiny wooden birds perched on the fireplace mantel, and a fleet of miniature boats rested on top of the bookcase. Florida leaned close to one of the boats. "People can't touch these, right?" she said to Dallas. "I'll bet if people touched these wee little boats, they'd get their hands smacked." Dallas was nose to beak with one of the birds. "People maybe could touch them a little bit," he said. "They'd probably get shot if they touched these things," Florida said. The screen door slapped against the frame as Sari entered from the porch. Both Florida and Dallas jumped back, stuffing their hands in their pockets. "Were you talking to me?" Sari said. "No, I wasn't talking to anybody but the air," Florida said. "Me neither," Dallas said. Words were coming out of my mouth, but they weren't aimed at anybody in particular. "I thought I heard you talking about our birds and our boats," Sari said. "Naw," Florida said. "What birds? What boats?" Sari slipped over to the bookcase. "These boats." She glided past the mantel. "These birds." "Well, I'll be. Look at all those little birds and boats, Dallas. You ever noticed those before?" Florida said. "No, I can't say I did," Dallas said. "Even if I had noticed them, I wouldn't have touched them," Florida said. "People ought to know better than to touch wee little fragile things like these." "Heck," Sari said, lifting up one of the birds. "They're not so fragile. They're made of wood. Here." She handed one of the birds to Dallas and one to Florida. "Golly, will you look at that," Dallas said. "It's so smooth, and it's got little feathers carved in and little eyes. And mine's got wee feet and a wee pointy beak," Florida said. Sari turned to the bookcase. "And these boats, they're pretty sturdy too," she said, passing one to each of them. "This one's even got seats and oars," Dallas said. "A little tiny elf person could row his boat on down the river." He tried to maneuver the oars. Oops! Oars came off. Oops! Seat got a little smushed. As Sari stared at the broken boat, Dallas took a step backward and raised his arm, as if to shield himself. Sari moved toward him and gently moved his arms away from his face. "It's okay," she said. Florida inched closer to Dallas. She was balancing a boat on her head and squeezing a bird in her hand. Snap! The bird's beak drifted to the floor. "I didn't mean it," she shouted. "I told you, people shouldn't touch them." Florida shoved the bird and the beak in the boat at Sari. "Go ahead, punish us, we don't care." "Punish?" Sari said. "I'm not a very good punisher." She shrugged and placed the broken bird back on the mantel. "I break things sometimes, and when I do, I try to fix them. We'll fix these later." She stood back, regarding the mantel. "We made these," she said. "Tiller made the boats, and I made the birds." "All by yourself? With what?" Dallas asked. "You get a little kit or something in the mail?" "No, we make the whole thing." "From what?" Dallas said. "From wood." "Where do you get the wood?" "Look out there," Sari said, gesturing toward the windows and the holler beyond. "There are about 1,000,000 trees out there in Ruby Holler. That's where we get the wood." "From regular old trees?" Florida said. "From regular old trees," Sari said. Florida rushed outside and slapped her hand against the maple tree which stood beside the porch. "Like this one?" she hollered. Sari stepped onto the porch with Dallas behind her. "That's right," she said. "What do you have to do?" Florida said. "Chop down a tree like this and then hack it up into a gazillion itty bits?" "And no, we don't chop down any trees," Sari said. "Look in that basket there." Dallas lifted a cloth off a wide wicker basket. Inside were short pieces of tree limbs. We find those just about everywhere. We pick the ones that speak to us," Sari said. Florida eyed her. "You think they talk to you? Like a crazy person thinks things talk to them?" "Not exactly," Sari said. "You just see a piece and you know it wants you to pick it up, and you know there's a bird inside, or maybe a boat." Dallas examined one of the chunks of wood. "What? Inside this stick thing? There's already a bird or a boat in here?" He knocked one against the porch railing. "How do you get it out?" As he knocked it against the railing a second time, the railing split. "Oops!" Tiller ambled around the side of the house. "What's going on?" he said. Florida and Dallas stepped back against the house. Sari studied their faces. "It's okay," she said. She turned to Tiller. Tell her, I think Dallas might want to help you fix this porch, and maybe we ought to do some whittling tonight. Got any extra knives? What are you talking about, knives? Florida asked. What are you going to do with knives? Are you going to stab somebody? Chapter 15, Conversations in the Night. Florida, Dallas whispered. You awake? Awake as an owl, awake as an old barn owl, she said. You remember when I had to get my picture taken for that passport thing? Dallas asked. Uh-huh. Not the best picture. Your eyes were droopy. You know what Sari said? She said she had to get my birth certificate too. And I told her I didn't have any birth certificate. We weren't born, I guess, Florida said. Of course we were born. We're here, aren't we? We just don't happen to have any of those birth certificate things in our pockets. But you have to have one to get that passport, right? Florida said. Where are you going to get one? Is there a birth certificate shop or something? Sari said not to worry, that she talked to Mr. Trepid, and he said he'd fix everything just fine. Mr. Trepid? That pitiful pincher? Hey, listen, Dallas said. Hear that? It's the train. Florida heard the faint wail of the freight train as it wound its way through the distant hills, and she pulled the quilt up closer to her face. The train sounded so lovely. In the dark alley behind the Boxton Creek home, two men met. It was too dark to see either of them clearly, but when one struck a match, the light flashed off his gold tooth. Here, he said, passing a wad of money to the other man. Just keep your lips zipped. The other man slid 2 fingers across his mouth. Zipped, he said. He pocketed the money, turned, and crossed the railroad tracks. In the downstairs bedroom, in the cabin, in the holler, Teller climbed into bed beside Sari and stared at the ceiling above him. It's weird having those kids up there. Were our kids that blasted clumsy? And did they eat that much? Sure, said Sari. I guess my brain pretty much forgot all that, Teller said. Do you think we were good parents? Sari turned to look at him. Of course we were. Once we made our mistakes and got over worrying so much. Sometimes I think we were just getting really good when all of a sudden those kids were grown up and gone. Maybe that's why it seems easier to me now, with Florida and Dallas. I figured we know what to expect and we know how to love kids. Tiller sat up. But I about died when we were trying to teach Dallas and Florida how to whittle. I thought fingers were going to zing off into the air. Did you see that robin Dallas made? That hacked up piece of maple he threw down the well? He sure was mad at that hacked up robin. And how about Florida's rowboat? Sari said. Did you see that little thing she carved? Before she buried it? Yes, I saw it. Looked more like a bucket than a rowboat. Remember our Charlie, Sari said, when he got so mad at a piece of wood that he set fire to it and then the porch caught on fire? Oh yeah, I remember you trying to beat out that fire with my good jacket, and I remember me yelling at Charlie and then feeling so bad afterwards that I made 2 accept my apology pies just for him. And out of all our kids, Sari said, Charlie turned out to be the one who was a natural carver. Outside, amid the chirps of crickets, a snowy white owl flew to the maple tree, calling, hoo, hoo. Sari said, Tiller, you know what Grace told me when Dallas and I were down in Boxton the other day, while Dallas was loading up the truck? What? She said that the Trepids called Dallas and Florida trouble twins. Grace said maybe we ought to be careful. Maybe we've done a stupid cockamamie thing taking these kids in, Teller said. Maybe we ought to take them back. Teller, you can't send them back as if they're a pair of boots and don't fit right. Here's what I think. That Dallas and Florida are no more trouble than most kids, and besides, you might not have noticed it, but I think you're actually beginning to enjoy messing around in the holler with them. Don't you make that face at me. You don't have to admit it, but I still know it. Tiller reached over to remove a piece of lint from Sari's hair. Well, if we do take these kids on our trips, and I'm not saying it's what we ought to do, but if we do, at least they won't be together, he said. How much trouble could one kid be? We each ought to be able to manage one kid. But they feel safe together, Sari said, like I feel safe with you. Is that a compliment you're giving me? It's just a thing I'm saying, that's all. Top of page 78. Hear that? Dallas said. Sounds like an owl out there. He crept over to the window and peered out. How come they call this place Ruby Holler? Florida asked. You seen any rubies yet? Dallas pressed his nose against the screen. Sari told me that in the fall all those maple trees turn scarlet red, and all those red leaves look like a million bazillion rubies dangling on the trees. And she said that now, in the summer, right after the rain, all those leaves look like a bazillion shimmery emeralds. And in the winter, after an ice storm, it looks like a bazillion gazillion sparkly diamonds in the trees. Well, why don't they call this Emerald Holler then, or Diamond Holler, or Jewel Holler? Florida asked. Heck, I don't know, Dallas said, staring into the blackness. I feel a mite bad, that Sari bought me all that stuff and I'm not even going to use it. And she's going to have to go all alone all the way to Kangadoon. I know, Florida said. The old man, lunatic, he's so proud of our boat, and he'll have to go all by himself all the way down a bunch of winding rivers. But we've got our plans, right? We're going to get on that night train, right? We didn't ask them to pay us, Florida said. They wanted to pay us. It's not like we're stealing the money, right? Later, Florida tossed and turned, slipping in and out of dreams. Finally, she was fleeing rats and lizards. And then she was in a canoe on a narrow river, paddling hard, and then golden light filled up the whole sky and the river, and a golden bird swooped down and sat on her knee and spoke to her. It said, Have you seen my baby? I'm missing my baby. Dallas dreamed of the leafy tree with the low hanging branches. Nearby was a stream so clear he could see every rock and every pebble on its bottom. He could see every stray leaf, every little minnow swimming along. In his dream, Dallas crawled out from under the tree and went to the edge of the stream, where a spectacular silver bird hopped along the bank. The silver bird stopped in front of Dallas, cocked its head, and said, There is a place where you can go, where everything is. Is what? Dallas asked. Where everything is what? But the bird never finished its sentence.